I'm Bill Oughton of Oughton Claims Management.
I'm Chantal Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster. Hey, Chantal, today we're going to meet and talk again about claims handling. And today's topic is taking statements. And it's an important topic because there's different types of statements you can take. You can take written statements or recorded statements. And there's a lot of things to think about when you're asking the questions that you need to in first and third party claims. Well, first of all, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are
Good.
you?
I'm doing well. So right now we're about in the middle toward the end, last half of January, and winter's kicking up, although we haven't had the weather that we typically do. So the slip and fall cases that we normally have around here are a little slow. We've had some wind activity though. So for first party claims, a lot of people are going to be out and about and hopefully taking statements on some of these things.
Well, if you're living in Kansas and Missouri, we have had 6 inches to 7 inches of snow earlier this week, and then we are in a storm watch now, where this weekend it is not supposed to get over freezing. So
That's
Chantel
kind
is
of the
not very
same.
happy.
Yeah. That's kind of the same pattern we had here. We had about 6 inches of snow at my house on Sunday, and but that was gone by Monday or Tuesday. It's all green grass right here now. But we are facing another windstorm this weekend and cold temperatures. So we'll see how it goes. So let's talk about the role of statements in claims adjusting. So
Sure.
what would you say the most important reason we take statements as adjusters?
It is to preserve everybody's memories, because if you've ever played that telephone game with people when you were in maybe grade school or high school or a communications class, and that's where someone will start a statement and then you go around the room and everybody is supposed to say the same statement and it comes back to the original person. It has changed somehow, and our memories have been scientifically proven that we don't have as good of memories as we think we do. And so the point that we want to, as adjusters, do is take statements, preferably on that first contact, and that way we can preserve the memory of everybody that was involved in the accident. That would be the first party, the insured, a third party, a claimant, perhaps, any witnesses that happen to have seen, if it happens to be like a motor vehicle accident or a slip and fall where there were people around, get those people, talk to them, get their recordings, because it's an unfortunate fact of life that sometimes our claims end up not settling for 2 or 3 years later. And that's because they're in lawsuits, or maybe the injury is particularly bad and our memories have faded by that point, or we've talked about it so much to so many people that they've influenced, not purposefully, of
Right.
course,
Right.
right? But like I said, our memories are not good. So that is the reason why we do it, is to get that evidence as adjusters, to preserve what actually happened.
I have a funny story about that, preserving the memory of what happened. And, I'll be the first to admit that my memory is not exactly ironclad sometimes.
Mhm.
But I had a claim, and there was an incident that happened. Oh, for example's sake, we'll say this happened in January. And I don't know, it was mid January. We took a statement later that month, maybe 10 or 11 days later, took a statement from the guy who got hurt. And over the course of the next year, he was continuing to get treatment, and we were collecting medical records. And nearly a year went by, and he called with some frustration that the claim hadn't been settled yet, which is not unusual. But he was still treating. He said, "Well, this happened in June." So what? No, this happened in January. And he swore up and down that this happened in June. I said, "Sir, no, we have a statement from you. We took a statement from you in January about what happened." And then he accused me of lying about it, and then went and got an attorney. So then we got an attorney's letter, and the attorney even put June 15th instead of January 15th. So talk about preserving things for the sake of, why, how that happened. I don't know. I don't know if the guy just really has a bad memory, or if
Mm.
he's on some medication or whatever, but, or maybe he's talking about a completely different claim that we
Different.
don't know about yet.
And that
Um,
happens too. And then you
right,
get the 2, medical bills conflated. I
right.
thought you were going to tell me about, and I have had this happen, where you take a recorded statement of someone and that person later on dies, like a witness,
Yep.
and so it wasn't someone involved in the accident except for a witness, but then at least I had that witness statement who could say, no, this didn't happen the way that the claimant actually says it does.
Sure. Yeah, people die. People move away to where you can't find them anymore,
Hmm.
or they decide that they don't want to cooperate any longer. So it's best to get statements nailed down as soon as you can.
Right.
So that's kind of why we take the statements, to preserve the evidence of that statement and memorialize it. So let's talk about techniques for effective statement taking. Now, I know of two. I will maybe make a caveat with two and a half. The two that I know of are recorded statements, where you're actually recording the conversation between two people. That's real time. That requires an introduction and a closing, so that you can kind of bookend the conversation, so that everybody knows when you're taking a statement and when you've stopped, particularly the transcriptionist, but also the parties that are actually being interviewed. So they know, okay, this is now being recorded, and now it's no longer. That's probably the most common. And based on some polling that I did, that is the most popular among claims professionals that I've polled on that topic. The signed statement is next, and when I was coming up, that was the preferred method. And there's some reasons behind that we can talk about down in segment 4 here, because that's going to compare the two. But and then the half one is a signed statement, which is more of an affidavit, which can be taken and notarized, so as a sworn statement. So those are the types.
Yeah.
Now, as
Yeah.
for techniques, what advice would you give somebody who has to approach somebody, maybe a witness, a non-party witness, or someone who does not want to necessarily cooperate in the investigation? Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, I have a couple of key phrases, and I don't know if we have that as a segment, but I did want to offer some key phrases for adjusters, both for old hands because maybe they didn't know these, and it's like, oh, that's much better than what I've been using, or for new hands at doing adjusting claims. And what I say to everybody, regardless of their status in the claim, is I'm going to take a recorded statement. This is simply where I'm recording a conversation between you and me. I'm going to be asking you questions. The reason why I'm doing this is because our memories change. You may move away. Unfortunately, these things may go to court. This helps me get this thing settled and taken care of before we get way down the road, and so your help in this matter is real important to me. And when you explain to a witness who may be a little reticent about taking a recorded statement, the fact that they are really helping you and that they are important and explaining how and why they are important, I've had that work out really well for me. I can think of maybe only one or two times when they have just steadfastly refused. And I've just said, okay, no harm, no foul. Do you mind if we just go ahead and go through this without it being recorded? Let me ask you some questions. Let me, get this information. And they've been willing to do that at least.
Sometimes when they refuse to have a recorded statement, I'll ask if they would prefer a signed statement. And signed statements aren't really, I don't think taught anymore, but the technique that you want to use when you're writing a statement is to write it from the perspective of someone else. So, and one of the things I'd like to do is practice taking a statement from you, Chantal, a
Okay.
recorded statement, so that people
Okay.
can understand how I start and end the conversation.
Sure.
But when I do a signed statement, I write it from their perspective. So if I was taking your statement, it would read, "My name is Chantal Roberts. I reside at whatever. My date of birth is whatever." And what was it, 1982 or something?
Oh,
Um,
2021, because I'm just so beautifully young.
so, but something along those lines. And then the rest of the statement would be from your perspective. I saw this happen, or I slipped and tripped and fell on the steps, those types of things. So in a recorded statement, however, it's a little different because we can't really do that. We have to be ourselves. So what I'd like to do is let's go ahead and pretend I'm taking a statement from you, and you can just answer the questions as best you can. And then I'm just going to do the intro. You'll
Mhm.
answer just a couple of quick questions, and then I'll do a closing. All right.
Sure.
All
Sure.
right. So if I'm taking a statement from you, I'm going to start out. I'll say, okay, this is independent adjuster William Otten conducting a recorded interview today by telephone with Chantal Roberts. Chantal, can you go ahead and state your full name and spell your last name for me?
Sure. It's Chantal Roberts, Roberts.
All right, Chantal, do you understand we're recording the conversation today?
Yes.
Is it being recorded with your permission?
Yes.
All right, tell me all about it. So then I would roll into questions all about the incident, and we have as detailed a conversation as we can. And then as we're approaching the end, I'll just simply say, all right, I think that covers everything I need today. Is there anything you'd like to add about the incident that we haven't covered here in this conversation? And you'll say yes or no, or whatever. And then once it's clear that you're done, I'll go ahead and say, okay, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Are the remarks that you've made in this recording are to the best of your knowledge the full truth? And you'll say
Yes.
yes or no. And then I will say, I'll ask again if we've had your permission to record the conversation, and you will say
Yes.
yes or no. So that's how I terminate the call then. And then I'll say, okay, with your permission, I'll turn off the recorder. My transcriptionist is so used to that line, I don't even think she listens to me say it anymore. I think she just types it. Now, one of the differences that I've been counseled on from various attorneys to do this and not to do this is to say at that last part, to say, under penalty of perjury, are all the remarks that you've made to the best of your knowledge the full truth? And it's interesting. I had one attorney tell me that's what I should do. I had another attorney read the transcript from one of those statements and say, Bill, I don't know if you can actually do that because I don't know
Mm,
if you're authorized to take an oath. I said,
right.
well, I can take an oath as a notary, but this is not a notarized situation. So I don't know. And I said, oh, and by the way, the person who counseled me on that was your partner. So,
Oh, awkward. Okay, so I can give you my 2 cents worth. And knowing how adjusters are viewed by the mass public, as the big bad enemy, the people who are out there to trick you into saying something, the people who are trying to deny your claim, and that's why they want to get a recorded statement so they can trick you into admitting that you're not as hurt as you really are if you were to listen to the plaintiff bar. I I would caution against it because if you say under the penalty of perjury, blah blah blah, as a consumer, as a layperson, my antenna automatically go up and I think you have tricked me. I have already given you this statement and now you're telling me I could perjure myself.
mhm,
Um, and attorneys, plaintiff attorneys, will say, oh, never give a statement to the insurance company because they will use it against you in the court, or they'll use it against you when they're trying to settle a claim or something like that. And my response is, A, goodness gracious, we don't have the time to sit here and think of tricky questions. We're busy, we're overworked and
mhm.
underpaid, you know. And then two, uh, no, but what we're trying to do is if you come up all of a sudden, if you started the accident with a neck and shoulder injury, like right shoulder injury. And at the end of the accident, when we're trying, or claim, when we're trying to settle, all of a sudden it's your neck, right and left shoulder. We're going to disclaim or deny the left shoulder unless you can give us good indication, and we will go back to that statement. That's how we quote unquote use that statement against you, and it's not being used against you. We're just going back to where everybody's memories were fresh. So that is my thing. And do you mind if I do my little spiel
Yeah,
of,
go ahead.
I mean, because I have also, just like you've been doing it for 20 years, and have come up with a role. And again, my philosophy is to take this and try to make the person that I am getting a statement from relaxed. And for that purpose, one, I will never use the word quote unquote interview, because if we all remember interviews, they make us nervous. You
Mm,
interview for a job or whatever. So I will never say, I want to take a recorded interview of you. I'll say, I want to take a recorded statement. And then, even if these people have an attorney, whoever I'm taking a statement from, usually, of course, it's going to be the claimant who has an attorney. Even if they have an attorney, I'm still going to say, do you know what a recorded statement is? And the person will say, yes, no, my attorney explained it to me, whatever. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and explain it to you anyway. Okay. So I'm going to start off with an introduction. That's, I'm going to explain who I am, what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to ask you a couple of name, rank, and serial number kind of questions, such as your name, date of birth, social security number, your address, your driver's license. So if you need to get any of that stuff out right now, please do so. And I know that a lot of people are really uncomfortable giving social security numbers over the phone, especially since I called you, if that's the case, especially since I called you, you don't know me from, Sam or whatever. If you're uncomfortable giving me your social security number, your last four is fine. That's fine. I just need some way to identify you 2 or 3 years down the road. If goodness forbid we can't settle this and we have to go to court, your sister isn't trying to step in your shoes or something, and I just try to make a little joke about it.
right.
And I also tell them that I would like to get a person uh, who would be able to get a message to them, you know, um, like a mother, brother, aunt, uncle, best friend, uh, someone who's not necessarily like their husband or their spouse or something like that. And this is in case you get up and move and you change phone numbers, you change addresses, and I need to get in touch with you. This is especially important for your witnesses so that we
Yeah,
can get in touch with them. And
that's a great
then
idea.
I open it up just like you. This is Chantal Roberts. I'm calling Bill Otten at phone number blah blah blah. It is now 8:54 a.m. Central Time on January 18th. Yada yada yada. Blah blah blah. And we just go from there. And when and then the next question that I ask after the name, rank, and serial number questions, as I like to call them, is I want you to tell me in your own words what happened. And that's when you'll hear me just hunting and pecking for the keys. And as I continue to explain the recorded statement to the people, I'm going to say, hey, you are going to hear me ask the same question multiple different ways. I am not trying to trick you. I am just trying to make sure I have your answer correct. And I will often say, you may hear a pause after you have spoken before I uh, ask the next question. That's me hunting and pecking for the keys because I am typing down what you say into my file right as we go, because I want to make sure that I have your information correct, that I have your part correct, that I have your story correct. And then, of course, like you said, I'll close it out in the same way, asking them, did you leave anything out? Do you want to, like, maybe I didn't ask you a right question. What else do you want to tell me? What do you think? This is how I say it. What do you think is important that I haven't asked you?
Yep.
What do I need to know that I haven't asked you? Again, it opens it up for them. Like if they forgot or they said, oh, maybe I need to say this or change a statement, they can do it right then and there. Close out the same way. And then I'll say, okay, the recording is off. Let me make sure that I've got a recording. Boom, I've got it. Okay, do you have any other questions? And go from there. And that is how I walk a person all the way through, even before I press record.
I just wanted to jump in and say that I did miss stating the date and the time when I
Mhm.
practiced with you there. And that's something that we have to do every time. So anybody who's listening, new person, whoever you might be, make sure you state the date and time in that intro
Yeah,
so that you can memorialize actually when it was taken, and you actually get a response from that other party confirming that that's the date and the time.
yeah.
So that nobody can accuse you of taking the statement at a different time and claiming that you took it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever.
Right. And they
Um,
and best practices is, and I'm taking this phone or I'm taking the recorded statement via phone call or via telephone, or I'm taking this recorded statement at such and such house at such a at such and such location.
in
Um,
person, yeah.
in person, yeah. And I know that you and I, before we went on recording, we were talking about claims pages. And for the adjuster who does not know, claimspages.com, I bet the link will be in the show notes,
Mhm.
will is a great tool. But I will caution new adjusters not to read every single question that is posed. Sometimes they're just not relevant. But let's say you have a mold case. They've got questions for mold cases. Sometimes you've got a slip and fall. They've got questions for slip and falls. So if you're not a member of claims pages, sign up, get your membership, and you can get that. They also have depreciation charts. I mean, they've
Oh
got
yeah, it's
everything.
a
I
great
mean,
great resource,
it
and a
is a
lot of
great
it's
resource.
most of it's free. They
It
do
is.
have a
Yeah.
paid membership option. I think it might be mostly for vendors who are advertising there, but and we don't have any relationship with them whatsoever. So you're not we're
Right.
not getting
This is not a paid
caught of anything.
advertisement. Yeah.
So but
This is
they
not.
they do a great. In fact, I was there. I looked there just yesterday for something to see if they had something. They didn't happen to have something along the lines I was looking for, but they do have a lot of really great resources. I think most of the resources are probably property related versus liability or auto, but they still have a ton
Really?
of auto stuff.
Oh,
The
yeah.
auto statements, they have got insured vehicle, claimant vehicle, driver,
Those kind of
I
statements.
think
Yeah.
they have a passenger one, I think.
They even have homeowners contents lists,
Yes.
and they have blank
Depreciation
proofs of
guides.
loss. Yes, blank proof of loss, blank
Yep.
policyholder releases. Anyway, this isn't a advertisement for them. They haven't paid us. We just happen to be fans of them and want to let you know, make your job easier. The art of adjusting. That's what we do. Yeah,
That's what we do.
yeah, that's
The
absolutely.
remaining segments that we have divided out here really touch on a little bit of everything we've talked about so far. And there's still a lot more to talk about. One of the things I would like to mention is that you are 100% correct that those statement guides can be gold, but they can also be kind of a lead weight around you if you're depending only on them. The
Yeah.
trick when you take a statement is to listen and allow their answers to inspire more questions from you.
Yes,
I told
absolutely.
a trainee the other day. I was critiquing a statement that she had taken, and I noticed it was very brief, and I created a list of questions that I think she probably should have covered in that statement. It wasn't groundbreaking, it wasn't a real huge problem because this was kind of a witness. But then I referred to the statement guides, and then I reminded her that when there's a deposition and attorneys are sitting there asking questions of a witness, those can go for hours and hours. And every question that is answered creates an opportunity for additional questions and that build on each other over time. So one thing I would encourage you to do as an adjuster is if you can find an opportunity to sit into an EUO or a deposition of some sort, that would that will go a long way to give you a sense of how long these statements should be and can be.
Yes. Hmm.
And I think your mindset should be to get comfortable sitting there having this conversation. Don't try and rush through it because you've got other things to do in the day.
Yeah, can I build on that?
Sure.
Absolutely. I delineate a good hour to take a statement,
Hmm.
even though it usually takes me 30 minutes to do
Hmm.
a statement. One of the things that you were, and you may get to this, and I think you were kind of hinting around at it, but I'm just going to steal your thunder because that's what I do. Is don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, and I think a lot of new adjusters are afraid to ask the hard questions because no one likes to be told no. No one likes to get yelled at. And again, this is where I use me trying to comfort people. Let's say you have an arson case or a fire case, and you know it's arson. You don't know who does it. We think it's the insured, you know. So when I'm taking that recorded statement of the insured, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have to ask you a hard question. And I know the answer, you know the answer, but I'm going to have to ask it anyway. Please don't get upset. Did you set the fire? I mean, we have to ask that
We
question.
have to ask it.
We have to ask it. And we know, even if the insured's going to lie to us, we know the insured's going to say, no, I didn't set it. And then the next question is, did you hire someone to set it? No. Okay. Now I know that, our mamas all raised us right. And, there are things that we don't talk about in polite society. That's, religion, money, and politics. But I'm going to have to talk about money. Are you behind on your payments? I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to have to see your mortgage bill. I'm going to have to see your bank statement. I'm going to need this. I'm going to need that. And you say it in the statement, and then you ask that person, are you behind on your mortgage? And that's you can start telling anyway. But the point being, and you had brought this up, is that you have to listen to them. Well, I was behind, but I got it all caught up. When did you get it all caught up? A year and a half ago. Oh, okay, that's not important. When did you get it caught up? This month? Yeah, maybe it's important.
Well, it'll be
So
caught up as soon as I get my insurance check.
exactly. So I need you to go ahead and cut that
I got an
check.
IOU.
Yeah, exactly. So, didn't mean to steal your thunder there, but you're
No,
absolutely right.
you're right on.
You need to ask those hard questions.
During arson investigate, well, not even arson. I think any fire claim I've ever had, I've asked if they intentionally started the fire. And most often I get something like, no, 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 no. They're kind of taken aback by the question.
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't
and
set them up to answer that though. I would rather see their actual reaction. But I've had people get mad. Now
yeah.
we can test your editing skills. I was taking a statement from a guy who had a public adjuster. The public adjuster was there with us during the conversation, and I asked, I said, "Did you intentionally set this fire?" And he just looked at me. He looked at his public adjuster, and he goes, "You fucking believe this guy?" And
I think I'm gonna
so
leave it in. I mean, we'll just put it as an E for explicit language. And
sure,
but
sure,
there's good points and bad points to it. And I would say, I mean, me now as an adjuster who's had 25 years experience, I don't care if people are yelling at me. But
right.
the 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5 year adjusters, they are still kind of uncomfortable with being yelled at and being told no and having someone be aggressive with them.
Mhm.
So I find that that is a nice way to disarm the situation. Is to sit there and go, look, I'm going to ask this question. I have
Right,
to.
right.
I hope you understand that I have to, but I've got to ask it.
Sure. One thing's not
Nowadays,
better
I'm
than
just
the
like
other.
you. Yeah, no, no. Nowadays, I would just ask it. Did you set the fire?
Right.
You know someone who did?
Yeah.
How are you on your finances? You behind? I would just be like, I don't care.
Right.
Um,
Their reaction, and that's why the actual responses that you get, the tone of their voice, their ability to come up with an answer, or whether they're fumbling around in the dark, like I trying to figure out what to lie about. that's why I think most of the polling that that had come back was for the recorded statement, because you actually get that real time. Now, we should probably talk about what are the benefits of each. The signed statement, as I said, was always the 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 one that
Used to be the gold
attorneys
standard.
seem to prefer, and the reason for that that I've learned is kind of silly in a way, um, but it has to do with legal procedure and stuff. So if you bring a transcript of an audio in, then you've got to have the person on the stand swear that that's them. They have to be able to read the whole thing and say, okay, but they could at any point say, I don't actually remember saying that. So, well, then we'd have to go through the trouble of sitting and listening to the whole thing and then verifying that it's actually their voice. And even then, they could still say, that sounds like me, but I just don't. So attorneys didn't like them because, or maybe still don't, because of that aspect, where when you have a signed statement, you actually have their signature. They read it. It's more difficult to deny that it's their signature on that document. Now, with signed statements, there's some consternation, I guess, about whether they actually read it. If it was written by the adjuster, is that the person's actual account of events, or the adjuster's version that they tricked the guy or woman into signing?
Okay, so let's go into that. Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to say poppycock and shenanigans to this whole. I don't remember, saying this, and we have to get a voice thing, because you can do the same thing for a written statement. Quite frankly, I
Mhm.
don't remember signing it. That's not my signature. Da 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 da. Blah blah blah. Now, going back to the written statements versus the verbal statement, I have heard back in the day, and you and I came into claims about the same time. Back in the day, like the generation right before us used to do written statements, and they were told, when you were talking to the witness or the claimant or the insured or whomever, to put a wrong statement in, so that the person that you are interviewing, be that the insured, the claimant, whomever, would cross that out, write the correct statement, initial it, to prove that they did read the statement, and that, everything was kosher.
Yep.
I don't like that. I think that goes back to that attorney idea of trickery. Plus the fact, who has time to do that? Well, look, our jobs are not to trick claimants, be it first party or third party. Our job is not to deny claims. Our job is to pay covered claims. That's what our
Mhm.
job is. That is
Right.
what our job is. Our job is to pay covered claims. And we don't have the time or the wherewithal, or probably the smarts, to trick someone into, doing all of this. But to your point, uh, you know, writing a false statement, like instead of saying, and then I got rear ended, say, and then I didn't get rear ended. It was only after 5 minutes or whatever, so that someone has to cross it out. It's way too much work, but I see your point. Anyway,
Yeah. So I that's an old school
very old school.
technique,
Mm,
and it is still employed today. I don't do it intentionally. I make plenty of mistakes on my own,
mm,
and so
mhm. Truth.
um but and it's not tricking any. If you did intentionally change the spelling of a word in a statement, or um got a date wrong or an address wrong or something wrong in there, with the idea that hopefully this person will catch that so that they can cross it out and initial it on their own when they read it. I don't know. It doesn't sound like evil adjuster to me. It sounds like you're just verifying that this person actually did read the thing.
What
Now,
happens if they don't catch it?
yeah, if they don't catch it,
I mean,
then you got to say,
I could read
"Hey, what
something.
about the spelling of that street there? It looks a little fishy to me, doesn't it?"
I mean, I could read it and just, or I could skim it and just not catch it. That
Right.
doesn't mean, that what. the adjuster wrote incorrectly is now true. It just
Right.
means I am a human as well, and I have made a mistake, just like the adjuster who may have unintentionally written something wrong, made a mistake. So why play these freaking games, guys?
Mhm.
We've got better things to do.
Just get the facts, get
Get
it
the
down,
facts.
and move
Yes.
on.
And move
Yep.
on. Get your claim settled,
Yep.
which could be a denial,
It
but
could
it
be.
could be a
It could
payment.
be.
It could be a payment, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's move on. We've got better things to do.
Right. So, one thing that you may come across when taking a statement, and this happens every so often, is that you'll get someone that is, well, there's two things to talk about here. One is someone who has a very heavy accent, whether they're not a non-native English speaker, or maybe they just don't have the best diction in the world. That can be a challenge with a recorded statement. And one trick that I use is, if I understand it, I'll repeat it back to them
Yes.
so
I was
that
just going to say the same
the
thing.
transcriptionist can understand what was being said. Uh, so that's one thing that I wanted to mention. The other thing is, sometimes you'll have statements from people that absolutely make no sense. They
Mm,
will say one thing at the beginning of the statement, and by the end of the statement, their story has completely turned around.
yeah.
If you detect that happening, and you should, if they're changing their story,
Yeah.
um, lean into that, and make them explain why. You said earlier that the sky was blue, and now you're saying the sky is green. Can you please, um, you know, account for that?
Yeah.
And most times, what you get is something like, "I never said that." But okay,
I
that's
I have
fine.
gotten I've gotten the, "Oh, okay, so this is what happened," and then it was, like, all tangential or,
Mhm.
whatever, and it does make for a long and hard recorded statement, which is why I delineate a whole hour to do it per
Mhm.
person.
Yeah,
So if that means I gotta take a whole day or a half a day to do 3 people, then if it only takes me 30 minutes, then that's cream.
sure, sure. And there's two types of folks. There's a type that won't shut up, and then there's the type that you can't get a word out of them. For the first type of person, where they won't shut up, uh, do you remember when you were a young kid and you went to the bowling alley and they put up the bumpers for you? You kind of have
Mhm.
to do that with those folks and say, okay,
Yep.
we it's really nice to hear about your Aunt Clara, but she wasn't there that time, and all I know is she bakes good cookies for now. That is not relevant. So let's focus on the incident at hand and kind of keep
Yes.
them on track.
Yes.
And you can find polite ways to do that.
Yeah.
I have, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So,
Yeah. Um, Going back as well to someone who talks a lot, but also being able for the adjuster to listen is I was working 2 accidents, 2 separate accidents, and, the police report had listed a witness, and she was a German native speaker, been in the United States for 50 years, but she still had a fairly rough accent. And I was taking the recorded statement of her, and she said, "I can't believe that was the second accident I saw that day." And I perk up and I'm like, "What other accident did you see?" And it happened to be the other one that I was working, which had a fatality on it.
uh,
And she wanted to start talking about that, but I'm on this one claim and I had to narrow her talk. Okay, Miss Witness, I need you only to talk about this accident right now.
mhm.
But as soon as I turn off the recording for this accident, we are going to do the very same thing. Even though you've already told me all of this stuff
Mhm.
at the beginning, this is Chantal
Mhm.
Roberts, yada yada yada, your name, your date of birth, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. Even all of that,
That's a real
for
important point. That
for
that
the second
formality.
statement, it has to be a
Yeah.
second statement.
Yeah.
The odds of that ever coming up again, I mean, trillion, billion, gazillion,
It
it
happens
will
more
never.
often than, well, it happens more often than you might think.
Really?
Especially, yeah, I see it a lot where I just did an interview last week of a woman who just months prior was witness to another. So she worked at a facility where the public comes and accidents happen. So it's very often you might find an employee who happens to witness a lot of things happen at their facility, whether it's a restaurant or manufacturing facility or whatever. And it can feel like a drag to have to start over. You end one, you got to go back and say the same, opening statement and go through the whole thing again. But that formality is important, and that's what professionals do. It's
I'll tell you
not
why.
professional to just kind of try and blend them
Commingle.
together. Yeah.
I'll tell you why it's important as well from an expert witness standpoint. If you commingle them, these statements as adjusters, you have commingled the file, which then, if one goes to lawsuit, means that the plaintiff attorney can then get into another file.
Mm.
And then they're starting to see a pattern in practice. And this is where we start getting into bad faith, because you prove bad faith by having a pattern and practice of doing something incorrectly.
Hmm.
And so that is why it is so extremely important to keep these files separate.
Yeah, if your intent is to hide bad faith, definitely take two separate statements. But the better
And
role
that
is,
is not what your intent is supposed to be, by the
yeah,
way.
don't commit bad faith, and you should be fine then. But just the same, it is unprofessional to try and mix
Yes,
those two things together with
yes.
the added risk of opening yourself up for bad faith investigation.
I wanted to mention something else about being a professional and perhaps people who have seen multiple accidents. And you specifically said restaurant, and
Mm.
that harkened me back to my history. Um, Sometimes, a lot of times, claims adjusting is not Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Mhm.
And sometimes the best time to get a witness statement or a claimant statement, especially if they don't want to cooperate, is on a Sunday at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., because people are at home watching football or whatever. And uh, that's when they're home. Monday through Friday, they're at work too. And they
Right.
can't spend 30 minutes talking to you, especially if they're hourly, working at, let's say, McDonald's, or, they're a bartender or whatever. If they're a bartender, they don't want to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning because they've been awake since like 3 o'clock the following morning. That's when they had to shut down. So, anyway, just FYI, you may have to take a statement at 6 p.m.
Mhm. Yep.
That, just hate to break it to you, but that's the career field.
So a few best practices that I will recommend before we wrap things up here.
Mm.
One of the tricks that I use when visiting people in person is to use two recorders. One, I
Mm.
use my cell phone, and then I have a handheld recorder, and I use them both because if one fails, then you've got a backup. The other
That's a
thing is
great idea.
yep. The other thing is to ensure that you are in an environment free of noise. So you don't want to be on a loud factory floor. You want to be in a closed room with a desk where you can position the recording device equidistant from both people. You don't have to be on top of each other, but a comfortable distance, like a dinner table across from each other, is fine. Depending on the equipment, know your equipment too, know what the capabilities are so that you know that if it's more than 4 feet away, you're going to have a problem. And then one other thing that I like to do to prep the person, and you had talked about some of the prep work, is to explain to them the importance of allowing me to ask my question before and to finish my question before they start to answer, so that we're not talking over each other. Because if we talk over each other, the transcription might be a problem for the transcriptionist. So I caution them to wait until I finish, and then you can answer. Now, you and I, when we do these talks, we talk over each other all the time,
All
don't
the
we?
time. I know. We both get really excited about our claims.
I
I'm
know, I
I'm the
know.
world's worst about it. I am, because I get so excited and I just want to talk about, everything. Yeah, I my key, statements would be to explain every single time. I do like to to talk about quote unquote the name, rank, and serial number issue when I'm explaining the recorded statement, and explain that I'm going to need to see to either see, which I take a picture of, the driver's license if I'm doing an in person, or have them tell me what the driver's license number is, and then the social security number. And a lot of people, because of cyber issues nowadays and stolen identities, are very uncomfortable with that, and let them know, hey, I still need your driver's license, but
Mhm,
if you only want to give me the last four of your social, that's fine. And then
mhm.
always get some other person who doesn't live with them who can get a message to them. And sometimes I have had people go, absolutely not, it's a no-go, and I just simply type refuse to answer, and that's fine.
Mhm.
There's you can't stop them. If
Yep.
you are doing an in-person recorded statement, do watch their body language. An adjuster is a jack of all trades, master of none.
There you go. Yep.
So, yeah. So there's a lot of things we need to know. So watch their body language, and that way you can tell them if you happen to be, I would say, young, quote unquote, in the adjusting field. Don't be afraid of asking those hard questions. And if you feel like you need to preference them, like I talked about, do that. I
Yeah,
drop
it's
it
okay to
now.
soften. Yeah, it's okay to soften the blow if you need to, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say FYI, just finally, if the claimant or the witness or the insured comes back a week later, 2 hours later, and go, hey, by the way, I forgot to add yada, yada, yada to my statement, don't think that that is some kind of way that they're trying to change things. Again, it's not a conspiracy theory or anything
Mhm.
like that.
Right.
They probably forgot, and it's okay. You can just add it in the notes and take it under consideration.
Yeah, that's a good point. That happens a lot.
It
And it
does.
it actually happens. I tell adjusters that when you go to a statement, you're going to get in your car and you're going to be about 5.3 miles down the road and you're going to go, why didn't I ask them XYZ?
Exactly.
That's what happens every time. So
Every time.
if you're a young adjuster and you have that scenario happen, don't beat yourself up. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, if we can forget things, they can forget things too.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's been very rare that I've had someone call back with some new bit of information that was so important to the case that I actually retook a statement to
Yeah.
clarify that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we'll take the statement, other things will happen, we'll get more information, and it will require that we actually retake a statement from them to cover a new issue that has come up that we didn't know about before. And that's usually not a problem if it's a non-party witness. That can be a little difficult to get them to cooperate because it's
Yeah.
such a drag to talk to us on the phone sometimes. But
Yeah. Do you remember that children, which would actually indicate someone under the age of 18, do need to have a parent
yep,
present or a
yep,
guardian? So even if they're 17 and a half, and the parents give you permission to talk to them without them being present, I would want written confirmation about that, or I'd want the parent at least there on the recording saying it's okay, I'm going to leave the room. And
mhm,
then you would state on, we still say tape or on the recording, that Mrs. Jones has now left the room. If there are two people present, like the attorney and the person that you're interviewing, also state, and Attorney Jones is on the line. Attorney
yep,
Jones, do I have your permission to record this conversation? Yes. Attorney Jones, do you realize that I'm recording this conversation? Yes. And then you do the same bookend. Attorney, Mrs. Smith, do you realize that I'm recording this conversation? Yes. Mrs. Attorney Jones, did you realize that I was recording the conversation? You put everybody under there so nobody has, you make it watertight, I guess is what I'm
right,
saying.
right. And I don't know that this needs to be said, but I feel like I better say it
You
because
better.
there may be somebody that doesn't know this. But if someone is represented by an attorney, you can't take their
Yes.
statement. You can't talk to them at all until you
Right.
call the attorney. And then if that attorney agrees to allow a statement, they'll make arrangements, or they should make arrangements to get everybody on a call together or to meet at
Yeah.
their office so that you can all be together at the same time. so that if you're asking a question and they don't want their client to answer that, they will interrupt you,
Yeah.
and you can't force them to answer a question. So
No, only the insured. And then that's when you get into an EUO, and that is a whole different podcast.
right, and if they have a public adjuster, chances are that a public adjuster is going to want to sit through that meeting too. Now, whether or not you have to allow them in is probably a subject for debate, but my whole career, I've never attempted to take a statement without the public adjuster available
Yeah, I
or
mean,
present.
it doesn't hurt,
Yeah.
but you know what? I have even allowed, let's say the wife was involved in the accident, for example, and the husband wants to sit in on the recorded statement. I have allowed that, even though the wife is an adult, if the husband starts to interject and create problems, I shut that down by saying,
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, you are not a party of this, accident. I realize that you care about your wife, uh, but I'm allowing you here as a courtesy. If you are going to continue to interrupt, I am going to stop the recording and start it at another time, excuse me, without you being present. And that happens. That happens to me every once in a while. And again, you just have to take control, because as the adjuster, it's your file, you're in control. And this is what you need to do to get the investigation done so that you can settle the claim. Settlement may be a denial, it may be money, but you need this to settle the claim.
That brings up something that is important, that if you have an equipment failure during your statement, let's say the red light on your recorder turns off because the battery died mid conversation, or you're taking a statement over the phone and the phone disconnects. So what do you do then?
Oh,
Well, you can try and reconnect with the person if you're on the phone. And if you can say, just say for the purpose of the recording, your name, the date and the time, and say that this is the continuation of a statement that we had begun earlier, and then make them state their full name and then move on with the questions just to verify that break. If it happens in person, you do the same thing. If it happens on the phone and you can't reconnect with them, that's the end of the statement. There's nothing else you could do. If the
you can
audio is
try on a different day or
you
time or
can,
whatever.
yeah, if you're really early into the statement, you need to start over, then do that. But if you're 2/3 of the way through your questions, unless you absolutely need something, I wouldn't restart a whole new statement. I would maybe contact them by phone and get some notes and put that in the file. But best judgment, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
I had forgotten about that, because back in the day, we didn't have digital recorders. We actually had tapes,
Tapes, yeah,
and we would actually take a statement that was long enough to go through like a 30-minute side of a tape, and you had to flip the tape
that's right.
over
Yeah, yeah,
to start recording. And so
I
that's when you
forgot
had
about that.
well, that's what reminded me, and that's when you had that interruption. You're absolutely right. So if that happens, yes, you're absolutely right. You just say, Mr. Otten, I had to flip over the tape. Do you realize that I'm recording this conversation? Yes. Is it done with your permission? Yes. I'm sorry, when the tape cut off, you were saying blah 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 blah
Right,
blah, and then I just let them go again.
right. I think those simple rules of conduct and formality, if you apply them to, every statement that you take, you're going to be better off. The
Yeah.
people who are unprofessional about it are the ones that ignore those kind of breaks in the conversation and just pick up without explaining what had actually happened. Because then it creates this dead space where, and I've also, I don't know if I've done this, but I've seen where people have said, can you confirm for me that we did not discuss this while the tape was off?
I've heard
Uh,
that too. I've heard
yeah.
that too. And that's a really good point.
Hmm.
And it just, again, you're making everything watertight.
Yep.
You're making everything watertight. Yeah.
Right. Just be as nerdy as possible about it and
Yeah.
you'll be fine.
Just be like Bill and me, which
Yeah.
I know you want to do, which is why you're listening to the podcast.
So many people aspire to be like us.
Oh gosh, so many. The fan letters are just pouring
know.
in.
I know.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Okay.
well,
So
I think that wraps it up. I think we've really covered just
everything.
about everything. And I'm sure after we hang up, 5.3 minutes after we hang up here, I'm going to remember
Mm,
something we should have talked about.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. I want to encourage everybody to, again, make comments either on the podcast part or the YouTube part, because we do have it in both places. We are going to talk about, we're already in basically February, about our next podcast, if you can believe it or not. And we're going to talk about treat yourself, which we got, of course, from Rex and Park and Recreation.
Yeah.
And that's going to be stress reduction techniques for adjusters, is what we want to talk about, because being an adjuster is stressful.
I'm going to be a passive passenger on that one. Great. Well, one thing that I would like to bring up before people leave here is that just a reminder that you may not realize that this podcast is being recorded for audio on your podcast apps, and it is also being published on YouTube. So you can watch us and see our smiling faces if you're listening and didn't know that. And if you're on YouTube only, you can always catch this on the audio side of things too on your podcast.
Absolutely. Listen to us in your car, working
There you
out,
go.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Very
right.
good. Take care.
Thanks. We'll see you later.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.auton.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.